Kunta Kinte was a young man from Jufure, in the Gambia, captured at just 17 years old. Born free, he was proud of his Mandinka heritage and determined never to forget who he was. But in 1767, he was seized by slave traders, chained and shipped across the Atlantic on the brutal Middle Passage. Sold into slavery in Maryland, he was beaten and forced to work on a plantation. When he refused to answer to the name Toby and insisted he was Kunta Kinte, his captors whipped him nearly to death. His defiance became legendary, symbolizing the struggle of millions who were stripped of their identities. Though generations passed, his story survived. Alex Haley, Kunta's descendant, brought his ancestors' journey to the world through the book Roots, ensuring Kunta Kinte's name would never be forgotten. Read the full story in the comments. This boy's life began in tragedy. John Sobhuza, from Uganda, was just a toddler when his father murdered his mother and then took his own life. Instead of ending up in care, John disappeared into the jungle, where he was taken in by vervet monkeys. For nearly 2 years the monkeys protected him, teaching him how to forage, climb, and travel through the wild. He became one of them, surviving against all odds. When John was finally discovered around the age of 7, he was unrecognizable. Villagers described him as a wild boy, able only to cry or demand food, and feared by those who saw him. But John's story didn't end there. Over time, he learned to speak, to adapt, and to live among people again. Remarkably, he went on to represent Uganda twice in the Special Olympics, turning a life once defined by tragedy into one of resilience and triumph. Tell me in the comments if you have heard of him before. She had never seen a chessboard. Born in the slums of Katwe, Uganda, Phiona Mutesi grew up scavenging for food, living in a shack with no electricity, and dropping out of school at 9. But everything changed the day she followed her brother to a dusty room where children were learning chess. She couldn't read, she couldn't write, but she saw the board, and understood power. She learned quickly, memorizing moves, anticipating opponents, and soon, she was beating boys twice her age. By 11 she was a champion in Uganda. By 15 she was competing internationally, traveling to Sudan, Russia, and beyond, all while still sleeping on a dirt floor back home. They called her the Queen of Katwe, a girl whose mind was sharper than her circumstances. She showed the world that brilliance doesn't need polish, it just needs a chance. Today, Phiona Mutesi is not just a chess master. She's a symbol of grit, resilience, and the genius hiding in forgotten places. This boy was told he had no future. Born in rural Malawi, William Kamkwamba dropped out of school because his family couldn't afford the $80 annual fee, but he refused to give up on learning. At just 14 years old, using a book from the local library, he taught himself how wind power worked. Then, with scrap metal, old bicycle parts, and pieces of blue gum trees, he built something unimaginable, a functioning wind turbine. It powered a light bulb in his home, then a radio. Eventually, he brought electricity and irrigation to his entire village, during a time of devastating drought and famine. At first, locals mocked him. But when the windmill blades started spinning, they saw more than just a machine. They saw hope. William's invention changed lives, and the boy once called crazy became a global symbol of resilience, innovation, and the unstoppable power of belief. She wasn't just Mandela's ally, she was the heart of the movement. Albertina Sisulu trained as a nurse, but healing wounds wasn't enough, not when her country was bleeding under apartheid. She joined the African National Congress, becoming one of its most powerful women, a leader of the ANC Women's League, a co-founder of the United Democratic Front, and a woman who organized one of the largest anti-apartheid marches in history. She balanced it all, resistance and motherhood. 5 children, constant police raids. Her husband, Walter Sisulu, jailed for decades. She became the family's backbone while becoming a symbol of national defiance. Albertina was arrested, beaten, harassed by the state. But she never broke. She raised not just her children, but a generation of young activists. They called her Mother of the Nation, not just for what she survived, but for what she built. Check the pinned comment for 10 facts that make her story even more incredible. This man spent 27 years behind bars, not for a crime, but for demanding equality. Born in a rural village, he was raised in the traditions of the Xhosa people, listening to elders' stories of justice and resistance, seeds that would one day grow into a lifelong fight for freedom. His name, Nelson Mandela, a revolutionary who dared to stand against apartheid, South Africa's brutal system of racial segregation. He helped lead a secret movement, risking everything to fight injustice. For that, he was arrested and sentenced to life in prison. Locked away in a tiny cell on Robben Island, he broke rocks by day and read by candlelight at night. While the world moved on, he was forgotten by many. When he was finally released in 1990, he shocked the world, not with rage, but with forgiveness. He met with his former jailers, he smiled, he listened, and then he led. In 1994, Mandela became South Africa's first black president. Instead of vengeance, he offered reconciliation. Instead of war, peace. His strength wasn't just in resisting oppression, it was in choosing unity after unimaginable pain. That's how 27 years in a prison cell helped create one of the greatest peace icons the world has ever known. This man was a revolutionary who dared to dream of a free Africa. Born to a poor farming family in Mozambique, Samora Machel trained as a nurse, but picked up a gun when he saw his people suffering under Portuguese colonial rule. He led Mozambique to independence in 1975, becoming its first president. But Machel wasn't content with freeing just his country. He openly supported anti-apartheid movements in South Africa and across southern Africa. That made him a threat. In 1986, his plane mysteriously crashed near the South African border. The cause, still disputed. Many believe apartheid forces sabotaged the flight to silence him. Samora Machel died fighting for freedom, not just for Mozambique but for all of Africa. His legacy still inspires those who resist oppression. This is just one of many stories erased from the spotlight. Want to learn more history they don't teach in school? Hit like and follow for the truth they left out. This boy was supposed to be king. Born into royalty in 1921, Seretse Khama was heir to the throne of Bechuanaland, now Botswana. Educated in South Africa and the UK, he was brilliant, charismatic, and black. Then he did something that shocked the world. He married a white woman. Ruth Williams, an English clerk, became his wife in 1948. Their love defied British colonial laws, and the brutal system of apartheid just across the border in South Africa. The backlash was immediate. His own government exiled him. Britain stripped him of his title. He lost his throne, not because he broke the law but because he broke tradition. But he didn't give up. Years later, Seretse returned, not just as a chief, but as the first president of an independent Botswana. He turned the nation into one of Africa's most stable democracies, all because he chose love and never backed down. Would you risk it all for love? Watch more true stories that history tried to erase. With more than 200 children and around 1,000 grandchildren, this man earned the nickname, the Swazi Bull. He was a king who ruled longer than any monarch in modern history. Sobhuza II became king as a baby in 1899 after his father's death, but it wasn't until 1921, at just 18 years old, that he assumed full power. For the next 82 years, he guided Eswatini through colonial rule, decolonization, and independence, holding the throne longer than any other modern monarch. Unlike many African nations that fell into turmoil after colonialism, Sobhuza preserved his people's traditions while adapting to change. He led Eswatini to independence in 1968, steering it with wisdom and a steady hand. Known for his deep connection to Swazi culture, he maintained harmony between ancient customs and modern governance. To his people, his reign is remembered as Eswatini's golden era, an extraordinary blend of resilience, cultural pride, and statecraft. When he passed in 1982, Sobhuza II left behind not only a nation but also a legacy. He had 70 wives. The Nuba people of Sudan became world-famous not for their own voices, but through the lens of Hitler's former photographer. In the 1960s, Leni Riefenstahl, once the filmmaker of Nazi propaganda, turned her camera on the Nuba, captivated by their strength, athleticism, and striking beauty. She portrayed them as untouched by modern life, wrestling under the sun, their bodies painted in vivid colors, living in harmony with nature. But the fascination was not innocent. Riefenstahl presented the Nuba as a kind of perfect race, echoing the same dangerous ideals that fueled Nazi ideology. Her books, The Last of the Nuba and People of Cow, mesmerized the world. Yet critics argued she was romanticizing them through a racial lens, reviving myths of human perfection while ignoring the realities of their lives. The Nuba, a proud people with rich traditions, became trapped in an image created for others. A story of beauty, yes, but also of exploitation, and the shadows of history that linger in a single photograph. Which story did you connect with the most? Let us know in the comments.